This account is delinquent, and frankly, your kind of bookkeeping is exactly why this community needs professional management. That was Tara Vance, president of the Stone Ridge Crest Homeowners Association, standing on my porch on a bright Tuesday morning in April, holding a violation notice she had printed on association letterhead, telling me I owed $1,100 in back dues on a lot I had paid in full for 9 straight years. She said it the way people say things they have practiced in the mirror. My name is Walt Hendry. I am 63 years old, and for 31 years before I retired, I was a forensic accountant who spent his career taking apart the books of companies that had quietly robbed themselves blind. What Tara did not know, standing on my porch with her clipboard and her certainty, was that I had spent the last 4 months pulling every financial record the association was legally required to hand over, and that the numbers did not add up by a margin of roughly $200,000. She thought she was auditing me. So I will ask you the same thing, I asked myself that morning. With her finger pointed at my chest and a folder of her own lies in her hand. What would you have done if you already knew where the money went? And you just needed her to keep talking. I did not say any of that to her. I told her I would look into it, and I closed the door, and I went back to the kitchen table where the records were spread out under the window in the order I had filed them. That is the thing about a habit you keep for 31 years. It does not switch off when you retire. It just goes quiet and waits. Let me back up, because the porch was the end of something, not the beginning. I moved to Stone Ridge Crest 11 years ago, the spring after my wife Diane passed. We had bought the lot together a long time before that, back when the development was just graded dirt and a hand-painted sign and a promise of mountain views, and Diane had walked the boundary with the surveyor herself, in boots, with a thermos of coffee, because she did not trust a man she could not watch work. She picked the corner lot at the top of the rise for the light. She said a house should wake up before the people in it do. We built it slow, over 4 years, paying as we went, and she lived in it for 6 years before the cancer took her in a single, hard winter. After that, the house was too quiet and too full of her at the same time, and I almost sold it. I stayed because my daughter Reese asked me to. She was 15 then, and she said, in the flat way, teenagers say the things that turn out to matter most, that she did not want to lose the house on the same year she lost her mom. So we stayed, and I kept the records the way I keep records, because keeping records was the one thing I knew how to do when I did not know how to do anything else. I should tell you what kind of accountant I was, because it matters to how this ends. I was not the kind who does your taxes in April. I was the kind a company calls, or a bank, or sometimes a court, when the money is gone and nobody will say where. For 31 years, I sat in cold conference rooms with bankers' boxes stacked to my elbow, and I read statements line by line until the lie showed itself, because a lie in a ledger always shows itself eventually. It cannot help it. A real transaction leaves a trail in 3 places at once: the bank, the invoice, the record, and all 3 have to agree. A fake one can only ever live in one place, and the work, all of the work, is just laying the 3 side by side and finding the one that stands alone. I was good at it, the way some men are good at reading weather off a sky. After Diane died, I thought I was done with all of it: the boxes, the cold rooms, the patience. I had the patience left over and nowhere to put it. It turned out I would need it again, closer to home than I ever wanted. For the first 6 years, it was an ordinary place. 41 houses on a loop road, a shared well system, a private road the county would not maintain, and a homeowners association that existed mostly to cut the common grass and keep the entrance sign painted. Dues were $240 a quarter. I paid mine by check, kept the carbon, filed the cleared copy. When it came back from the bank, the board met 4 times a year in the clubhouse, and almost nobody came. I went to every meeting, not because I cared about the grass, because Diane had cared about this place, and going felt like keeping a promise I had not technically made out loud. Then, about 3 years ago, Tara bought the big house on the far end of the loop, the one with the iron gate the previous owner had put in, and within a year, she was president of the board. I want to be fair about her because the story does not work if she is just a cartoon. Tara was good at the part of the job that gets noticed. She got the entrance sign relit. She organized a summer social.
How?
She sent out a glossy newsletter with her photo at the top. People liked her at first the way people like anyone who shows up with energy and a binder. What I noticed, sitting in the back of those quarterly meetings, was smaller. The financial report stopped being a single page anyone could read and became a spoken summary. The line items thinned. The phrase she used over and over in that bright managed voice was that the board had moved to a more streamlined reporting format. I have heard a lot of phrases like that in 31 years. They almost always mean the same thing. They mean someone does not want you to see the rows. The first time I asked a real question was at the meeting 2 years ago, in the fall. The treasurer position had quietly gone unfilled, and Tara had taken it over herself, president and treasurer both, which is the kind of thing that should make a careful person sit up. I raised my hand and asked plainly what we had spent on road maintenance that year, because I drove that road every day, and I had not seen a single truck on it. Tara smiled at me, the way you smile at a slow child. "Walt, the road account is handled through our management partner now," she said. "It is all very professional. You do not need to worry about it." That was the first thing I filed, not a document yet. Just a sentence, written on a legal pad, dated, with her name beside it. Worry about it. I have found that the people most eager to tell you not to worry are the ones who have given you the most cause. What she did not know was that I had read the association's governing documents the week I moved in, 11 years before, the way I read every contract I have ever signed, all the way to the end, where the boring parts live. And the boring parts of the Stone Ridge Crest bylaws said something Tara had clearly never bothered to read. Any member in good standing could demand, in writing, a full inspection of the association's financial books and records, and the board had 30 days to produce them, in full, or stand in violation of its own charter and the state non-profit statute that the charter was built on. The right was older than her presidency. It was older than her gate. And I was, despite what her letter claimed, a member in good standing, because I had every cleared check for 9 years in a folder 6 feet from where I was standing. The road that took me to that porch began the way these things always begin, with something small enough to ignore. It was a Thursday. In October, 2 years back, when the first real notice came, not a newsletter, it said my mailbox post was non-conforming, and that I had 30 days to replace it with the approved model available, the notice helpfully added, through the association's preferred vendor for $320. My mailbox post was a cedar 4x4. Diane and I had set in concrete with our own hands. I remember the day we set it. She held the level against it and I shoveled the mix, and she would not let me tamp it until the bubble sat dead center. And when it finally did, she put her thumbprint in the wet concrete at the base, low, where the grass would hide it, and she never told me why, and I never asked. That thumbprint was still down there. There was nothing wrong with that post, except that it was mine and not theirs. I read the notice twice, standing at the end of the driveway with the metal mailbox door hanging open and the October light coming sideways through the pines. Then I drove the loop slowly, all 41 houses, and I counted. 11 other houses had the exact same style of cedar post. None of them had gotten a notice. I drove home and I wrote that down. Incident 1, I did not replace the post. I sent a letter, certified, return receipt requested, politely asking which specific provision of the recorded covenants my post violated, and requesting the citation in writing. That is the move people like Tara never expect, because it is so boring. I did not yell. I did not call anyone. I asked, in 2 sentences, for the rule. The 30 days passed. No citation ever came, because there was no rule, because they had never read the covenants either. What came instead in December was a fine, $50. Then another notice in January, saying the 50 was now overdue and accruing interest at a rate the notice did not bother to name. Incident 2, Incident 3. I paid none of it, and I filed all of it, and I started a manila folder with a label. And on the label, I did not write Tara's name or the word fines. I wrote the address of my own house, because that is what the fight had quietly become. A fight over whether the house was still mine. By spring, the notices were arriving roughly once a month, and they had stopped being about the mailbox. Now it was the color of my shed. Now, it was a trailer I parked on my own gravel for 2 days while I hauled brush. Now it was a fine for, and I'm quoting the notice, an unkempt appearance, inconsistent with community standards, which was a photograph someone had taken of my truck in my own driveway with the tailgate down. Each one carried a dollar figure. Each one said the amount was due to the association and was accruing interest. By the end of that first year, the paper said I owed the Stone Ridge Crest Homeowners Association something north of $900, and I had paid every legitimate dollar I had ever owed them, and the gap between those two facts was the whole story, though I did not yet know how big the whole story was. Reese was 17 by then, in her last year of high school, and she was the one who said the thing that turned a folder into an investigation. She had come home and found me at the table with the latest notice, and she read it over my shoulder. And she said, "Dad, she keeps saying you owe money. Where does the money go? Like, where does it actually go?" And she went back to her homework, and I sat there, because my own daughter had just asked, in one sentence, the only question that matters in my entire former profession. Not did the money move, where did it go? The next morning I sent the letter, the one the bylaws gave me. A written demand certified citing the exact provision for a full inspection of the association's financial records going back 5 years. The general ledger, the bank statements, the vendor invoices, the board meeting minutes, the reserve study. Everything the charter said, a member in good standing could see. The 30-day clock started ticking, and I want to tell you what Tara did, because it is the first time you get to see her commit to a position she could not defend. She ignored it. Then, 4 days before the deadline, I got a phone call. Not from Tara. From a man who introduced himself as the association's management consultant, a smooth voice that called me Mr. Brad. Handry and explained that my request was, in his words, overly broad and burdensome, and that the board would be happy to provide a summary of finances at the next quarterly meeting. I had heard that voice before too, in depositions, across conference tables, on the far end of a phone line from men who had already shredded the thing I was asking for. I told him, level, that the bylaws did not provide for a summary. They provided for the books. I told him the 30 days were the board's clock, not mine, and that I would see the records, or I would see them in front of a judge. Then I hung up, and I wrote down the date and the time and the word burdensome, because I have learned that the specific words people choose when they are stalling are evidence all by themselves. On the 30th day, a box arrived. A single banker's box, left on my porch without a knock. Inside were 2 years of bank statements, partial, with pages missing, and a stack of what they wanted me to believe was the general ledger but was really a spreadsheet someone had printed the night before, formatted to look official, with round numbers in all the wrong places. Round numbers are a tell. Real expenses are not round. A roofer does not bill you exactly $4,000. He bills you $4,118, with a line for the dumpster. When every number in a ledger ends in 3 zeros, someone made them up at a keyboard, and they made them up fast. I spread it all out on the kitchen table, to the window where Diane used to do the crossword, and I did the thing I had done 10,000 times in my working life. I started reconciling. Bank statement against ledger. Ledger against minutes. Dues collected against dues recorded. And the floor of the whole thing fell out within the first hour. Here is what the numbers said, and I am going to give them to you the way I gave them to myself, because the numbers are the spine of this. 41 houses. Dues of $240 a quarter. That is $960 a house per year, times 41 houses, which is $39,360 a year. Coming into the association, in dues alone. Add the road assessment Tara had pushed through her first year, $400 a house, another $16,400. Call it just under $56,000 a year, flowing into one bank account, controlled by one person who was both president and treasurer. Over the 3 years since she took the board, that was more than $165,000 in dues and assessments. The reserve account, the savings. The association had built over a decade for the road, and the well had held just over $90,000 the year before Tara arrived. I knew that number, because it was in the last clean financial report, the one-page kind, from before the streamlined format. The bank statements she sent me, partial as they were, showed the reserve account at $11,000. The grass still got cut. The sign stayed lit. The road, though, had not been touched. The well pump was original, and the reserve had been bled down to almost nothing, while more money came in every quarter than the association had ever collected in its history. The arithmetic did not have a hole in it. It had a drain. I sat at that table with my reading glasses pushed up on my forehead, and I felt the old thing come back, the thing I used to feel right before. I knew a case was real, which is not excitement and is not anger. It is a kind of stillness. The numbers do not lie, and they do not get angry. They just sit there and wait for someone to read them out loud. The box was incomplete on purpose, though, and incomplete records are a wall, not a window. I had the shape of the theft. I did not yet have the proof that would survive a fight, because the vendor invoices were missing, and the bank statements had gaps right where the largest withdrawals should have been. So, I did what the bylaws and the statute let me do. I wrote a second demand, narrower, sharper, citing the specific missing months and the specific missing vendor file, and I copied it, certified, to the state agency that registers nonprofit corporations, with a cover note that did nothing more than state the dates and the amounts and ask whether the association was in compliance with its reporting requirements. I did not accuse anyone of anything. I just put the numbers next to the law and let a neutral office hold them. That was a Monday. The following Saturday, Reese called me from her car, and her voice was wrong before she said a word. "With Dad," she said. "There's a guy. He's at the gate. He's got a clipboard, and he says he's a county building inspector, and he needs to come look at the house. He won't show me a badge. Dad, he's parked behind my car." I was 40 minutes away, at the county records office of all places, pulling the original recorded plat. I told her to stay in the car with the doors locked and to put her phone on the dash and start recording, and not to open the gate for anyone. I stayed on the line with her the whole 40 minutes. I heard the man knock on her window. I heard him say, in the bright, bullying voice of a person who has never once been a building inspector, that he was there on official business and that obstruction was a serious matter. I heard my daughter, 17 years old, say through the glass, in a voice steadier than I felt, "My dad says you can show your badge to the sheriff." And I heard the man stop talking because she had said the word. And a man with a real badge does not flinch at that word. A man with a clipboard he bought off the internet does. By the time I got home, he was gone. But the dashboard camera had 4 minutes and 11 seconds of him. His face, his clipboard, the magnetic sign on his car door that did not match any county vehicle, and his voice claiming to be a county official, which is a crime in our state with a specific statute number I happen to know. I backed that footage up to 2 drives that night. One stayed in the house, one went in my truck. That was incident. I checked the folder. That was incident 19. And it was the first one that had put my daughter behind a locked car door. And it was the one that moved this from a paper fight to something I was going to finish. The next Monday, I drove to the sheriff's substation and I sat across a scratched metal desk from a deputy named Cole Webb, a calm, heavy-set man about my age, with a coffee ring on his blotter and a way of listening that did not rush. I laid the dashboard footage on his screen and the folder on his desk, and he watched the 4 minutes and 11 seconds twice, the second time leaning in close at the magnetic sign on the car door. He listened to the whole thing after that, without interrupting, turning a few pages of the folder with one thick finger, and then he told me something I already knew but needed to hear from a uniform. He said that a fraudulent fine was a civil matter until it wasn't, and a man impersonating a county inspector and detaining a minor was not civil, it was criminal, and that the footage was about as solid as footage gets. Then he leaned back, and his chair creaked, and he told me the part that turned my accumulation into a countdown. He tapped the folder. "Mr. Hendry, I can act on this one incident. Now, if what you're telling me about the money is true, that's not my department, that's the state. And the state moves on patterns, not feelings. You build me a clean pattern, dated, documented, with the bank records, and I will walk it to the people who can do something. How many incidents you got written down?" I told him. 19, dated, with copies. He almost smiled. "Keep going," he said, "and get me the bank record she's hiding." What I had not told the deputy, because I was still confirming it, was the thing the plat map and a public record search had handed me that same week. The thing that turned Tara Vance from a petty tyrant into something with a motive. The smooth-voice management consultant who had called me about my burdensome request was not an outside firm. The company he worked for was registered to an address that matched Tara's house, and the company was owned by a man named Greg Vance, her husband. The association had been paying a management fee, $16,000 a year, to a company owned by the president's husband for services that, as far as I could tell from a road no truck had ever touched, did not exist. That was not skimming. That was a structure. Skimming is a hand in the till. This was a faucet plumbed straight from 41 families into one household. with a fake vendor in the middle to launder it into something that looked like a bill. The fines, I finally understood, were never about my mailbox. They were about creating noise. A treasurer who fines everyone looks like a stickler. A treasurer who fines no one and whose reserve account is empty looks like a thief. The fines were camouflage, and the angrier I got at the fines, the more I looked like just another grumbling neighbor, which is exactly what she needed me to look like. The state agency I had copied does not move fast, but it does move. About 6 weeks after my filing, I got a letter on state letterhead saying the association had failed to respond to a request for its annual financial filings for 2 consecutive years and was being referred for review. It was dry as a stick. It did not accuse Tara of anything. What it carried, though, was the first piece of paper in this whole fight that had a government seal on it instead of a homeowners association logo. And it was the first one that was not addressed to me as the problem. I made a copy. I added it to the folder. The folder was 3 inches thick now. And then Tara did the thing that ended it the way these people always do, because incuriosity is not a tactic you can turn off. She called a special meeting of the association. The notice went out on the glossy letterhead, and the stated purpose was to address, and again I am quoting, ongoing disputes with a non-compliant homeowner who has refused to engage with the community in good faith. That was me. She had called a meeting of all 41 houses to publicly censure me, to pass a resolution authorizing a lien on my home for the fines I supposedly owed, and she had, without knowing it, just scheduled the exact public venue I needed. I made copies that week. Not of everything. I am not a fool, and a 41-house meeting is not the place for nuance. I made one clean, 2-page handout. And on it I put exactly 2 columns. On the left, money in. Dues and assessments collected over 3 years, by year, totaled $165,000. On the right, money out, the documented part. $16,000 a year to a management company owned by Greg Vance. The reserve account drawn from $90,000 to $11,000. And a road maintenance line that totaled $48,000 over 3 years for a road on which, by the county's own inspection record that I had requested and now held, no permitted work had been performed. At the bottom, I wrote one line, no adjectives, just the gap. Roughly $200,000 unaccounted for. I did not put my name on it. I did not need to. The numbers were not mine. They were theirs. The meeting was on a Thursday evening in the clubhouse, and I want to slow down here because this is the part I had waited 2 years and filed 200 pages to reach, and it did not look like anything from the outside. The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee, and the folding chairs squeaked when people shifted in them. It was full, 41 houses worth of tired people in their after-dinner clothes, more than I had ever seen at a meeting in 11 years. Word travels when a man is going to be publicly shamed. Tara stood at the front in a cream blazer with a gold pin shaped like a little house, beside a folding table where Greg sat with his laptop open and his consultant's smile arranged on his face. She ran the first 20 minutes like a performance, the newsletter voice turned all the way up, walking the room through my supposed violations, one at a time. The mailbox, the shed, the trailer, the photograph of my truck. The fines, the unpaid balance now grown, she announced, reading it off a slide. She asked the room to authorize a lien on my home to secure it. She had clearly practiced the next line, because she turned and delivered it straight at me, slow, for the room. Some people simply refuse to understand that this is a community, not a personal kingdom, and that the rules apply to everyone equally. A few people nodded. Most just looked tired, the way people look when they have come out at night to watch something they already suspect is wrong. Deputy Cole Webb was standing at the back wall, in uniform, hands folded, because I had called him that week and asked him to come, and he had said he would come as a neutral observer and nothing more, which was all I wanted. He was not there for me. He was there for the record. That was enough. When Tara opened the floor and asked if there was any discussion before the vote, I stood up. I did not give a speech. I have sat through enough of other people's speeches to know they change nothing. I walked to the front, and I handed Tara one copy of the 2-page handout, and I handed one to Greg, and then I walked a stack down the center aisle and let the neighbors take them and pass them back hand to hand the way a collection plate moves. And then I said the only thing I said all night. Before anyone votes on what I owe, I said, I think the room should see what was collected and where it went. The numbers on that page are from the association's own bank statements and the county's own records. I did not make any of them up. I just added them together. Then I sat down, and the room got quiet in the particular way a room gets quiet when 40 people are all reading the same number at the same time. Tara's voice came back fast and high. This is slander. This is a personal attack. This man is not a financial professional. He is a bitter old, I'm a forensic accountant, I said, from my chair, not loud. 31 years, retired. The page is just arithmetic. Anyone here can check it. It was the only time in 2 years I told her what I had done for a living, and I want you to understand I did not say it to win. I said it because it was the one fact in the room that nobody could argue with, and because it answered finally. The question Tara had been asking on my porch with her clipboard. She had been so sure she was the one auditing me. What happened next did not happen because of my page. It happened because of the page plus the man at the back wall. A woman 3 rows up, a retired schoolteacher named Joan, who had lived there longer than anyone, stood up holding the handout and turned, not to me but to Deputy Webb, and she asked the only question that needed asking. Is this true? Can you just say this? And Webb, who had come to observe and nothing more, said the calm, true thing a constrained officer says. Ma'am, I can't speak to the numbers. What I can tell you is the association's been referred by the state for failing to file. That part's a matter of public record. And there's a separate active investigation into an incident at this man's property involving someone impersonating a county official. He paused. I'd hold off on any vote. He did not accuse anyone. He just laid the public facts down next to my arithmetic, and the two of them together were heavier than anything Tara could lift. Greg closed his laptop. That was the sound the room turned toward. A laptop closing. He stood up, and he said to the room, not to his wife, I think we should table this. And in those 5 words, every neighbor who had been on the fence understood exactly who he was, because a man with nothing to hide does not table the meeting. He flees it. The vote never happened. There was no lien. There was, instead, a silence that lasted long enough for Tara to understand that the room had changed sides between 1 minute and the next, and that she had called every witness to her own undoing into one place and turned on the lights. The proportionate part, the part the niche-minded among you are waiting for, came over the following months, and it came not as my revenge, but as the automatic consequence of her own structure. The state review became a forensic audit, a real one, conducted by people with subpoena power I never had, who got the bank records I had only ever seen pieces of. I gave them my folder, all 3 inches of it. The woman who came to collect it, a state examiner, with reading glasses on a chain and the same flat patience I recognized from my own mirror, sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours and turned the pages without a word. and at the end she tapped the 2-column handout and said, "Quiet, you did the whole thing in 1 page." I told her the 1 page was for the neighbors. The 3 inches were for her. The management company owned by Greg Vance was the thread, and when they pulled it, the whole garment came apart. The total they documented was larger than my page. My page had said roughly 200,000. The audit, with the records I could never have forced loose on my own, found $241,000 moved out of the association over 3 years through the fake management fee, padded road invoices for work never done, and direct transfers from the reserve account into a personal checking account in both their names. $241,000, against which the association's clean record, the dues that 41 families had paid in full and on time, year after year, sat in perfect order because working people pay their dues. The gap between those two numbers was the gap between the people who keep records and the people who hope no one else does. Tara was removed as president by an emergency vote of the membership, the only vote that meeting ever produced. Greg's management company lost its registration. The matter went to the county prosecutor, and the charge that opened the door was not even the big one. It was the impersonation. The man at my gate, the 4 minutes and 11 seconds on Reese's dashboard camera, the badge bought off the internet, turned out to be a contractor Greg had hired and instructed, and when that contractor was offered the choice between his own charge and telling the truth about who sent him, he chose quietly to tell the truth. The smallest incident, number 19, the one that had put my daughter behind a locked door, was the one that pried the whole thing open. I have thought about that more than anything else. The theft was the crime. The moment she reached toward my child, though, was the moment that broke her, because that was the moment the neighbors stopped seeing a dispute and started seeing a danger. The reserve account did not refill overnight. These things grind slow. Restitution was ordered all the same, and the lien they tried to put on my house was never spoken of again. And the road, 2 summers later, finally got the work it had been billed for years before. I drove the loop the day the paving crew finished. The asphalt was black and clean, and it smelled like tar in the sun. And I thought about Diane walking the boundary of our lot in her boots with her thermos, not trusting a man she could not watch work. And I understood that I had spent 2 years doing exactly what she had done. I had watched the work. I had just been watching the wrong man do the wrong work for a very long time. Reese is 20 now. She is in her 2nd year at the state university studying, and she did not get this from nowhere, accounting. She came home that first winter break, and we sat at the same kitchen table under the window, the one where Diane used to do the crossword and pin, and she asked to see the folder, the whole thing, start to finish, and she read it the way I had taught her without ever meaning to teach her anything, her finger moving down the columns the way mine does. When she got to the end, she closed it, and she sat for a second with both hands flat on the cover, and she said, "You never yelled at her, not once, in the whole folder." And I told her the truest thing I know, which is that yelling is what you do when you do not have the records. When you have the records, you do not have to raise your voice. You just have to add. So, here is the lesson, plainly, because you came this far, and you have earned more than a story. If you own property under any kind of association, request the financial records in writing this year, before there is ever a dispute, because the request itself is a thing they have to answer, and the answer tells you everything. Ask for the bank statements, and the general ledger, and the vendor invoices, all 3, by name, because any one of them alone can be faked, and all 3 together cannot watch for round numbers, because real bills are never round. Watch for one person holding both the president's seat and the treasurer's seat, because that is the single condition every story like mine has in common. Read your bylaws to the last page, because the power you need is almost always already written down and unread. When a notice comes, do not argue it on the phone, where there is no record. Answer in writing, certified, asking for the specific rule, and keep the receipt. Keep a dated folder. Photograph what you build so that what is yours is provable. And if anyone ever stands at your gate claiming an authority, they will not show you a badge for. You teach the young people in your house one word, the word my daughter knew to say through a locked car window.
Sheriff?
The honest ones. Never mind hearing it. Watch the money, not the noise. They will always give you noise, the mailbox, the shed, the color of your paint, because the noise is where they want your eyes. The money is where the truth is. 2 columns on 1 page. What came in, where it went, the gap is the whole story. If you have a story like this one, a board that went wrong, a fight you won or lost across your own fence line, put it in the comments, because somebody scrolling tonight needs to read it and know they are not crazy and not alone. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe, and I will keep telling them. Next time, I will tell you about the retired land surveyor. 2 valleys over whose HOA tried to claim his back. 40 was common area, and the single brass pin in the ground set 90 years ago. That proved every one of them wrong. Until then, keep your records. Walk your boundary, and do not let anyone tell you not to worry about it.